As gamers, we are unfortunately in a world where everyone is addicted to releasing absolute trash remakes and remasters of their games for a quick and easy buck. Most of the time, they're trying to bank in on nostalgia. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about some of the best remasters of a franchise that I have quite literally ever played, and this is going to be discussing specifically Tomb Raider 1 through 3 Remastered, which was developed and produced by Asper as well as Crystal Dynamics. This is an absolutely fantastic remaster. They brought it into the modern age, and they really just made it run on modern hardware while still preserving the original feel, which means that this is equally accessible for nostalgic fans, anybody who's curious and might be just trying to get into the series, or people like me who have played the newer games but haven't had the chance to go back and play the older content. So we're going to be talking about the remaster quality as well as gameplay and doing just kind of a quick review on whether or not this is worth your money here in 2025. So let's go ahead and hop straight into it. So if you're new here and you're unfamiliar with my game reviews, well, first of all, welcome and thank you for joining. I hope you'll stick around. There is a subscribe button down below if you want to go ahead and help support the channel, as well as the notification bell that you can ring if you want to support it a little bit further. So that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the positives of the game, as well as some of the negatives, and then we're also going to go ahead and sum it all up with the SWAS meter, which will break that down a little bit more once we get there, ladies and gentlemen. So I also want to start with a quick caveat that we are going to be talking specifically about Tomb Raider 1. Considering that you get Tomb Raider 1 through 3 all under one title, I didn't want to do a comprehensive review of all three games to avoid any sort of potential spoilers. If you do want to see a longer video breaking this down, though, definitely go ahead and let me know down in the comments. So let's go ahead and hop into the positives. So the game has very much clunky, yet what I would categorize as satisfying gameplay. So there's a lot of initial jank that you have to try and get over with this, which would include like the traditional kind of tank controls that you have. They did also add a more modernized option as well, but the movement itself also feels very stiff, but it also feels skill-based, so it does take a little while for you to adjust to, you know, the movement and just the dynamics of how the game work, essentially. But once you do make that adjustment, and once you understand the parkour and all the different button inputs that you can do and everything like that, it really grows on you, and it does actually make the combat as well as the parkour start to feel both deliberate and skillful, which is very, very nice, right? So these games are definitely a little bit more based around the whole idea of like puzzles, as opposed to exploration. So with the newer Tomb Raider games, you have a lot more of that exploration side of things. You have a lot more like focus on combat and that sort of stuff. In these older games, it seems like the focus was more so on environmental puzzles, exploration on that front, as well as finding secret areas. There's not a whole lot of focus put on the combat, so if you're just looking for a root and toot and shoot 'em up, probably not the title for you. And speaking of exploration, we're going to go ahead and talk about that. I found the exploration in this game to be extremely deep as well as rewarding, which is a very good combination. So some paths, so even main paths or main areas in the levels, feel almost like secrets, right? So the level of exploration that you have to go through to actually find some of these areas, even for main story progression, is going to be similar to the levels of exploration that you'd find in modern games for finding secrets, which is a pretty cool feeling, but also definitely an adjustment, because I was definitely more so the player that was just running straight through it, not really looking for secrets, and I was missing out on a lot of stuff because of that. This does do a fantastic job when it comes to adding some sort of a sense of discovery and accomplishment, and then obviously, you know, trying to push out and explore new areas inside the game is a lot more enjoyable when you have an actual motivation to do it. To kind of compare it to like a modern title that's not even the same genre, but Ghost of Tsushima, one of the issues I had with that title is that the world just felt dead. There wasn't much of a reason to explore. Like the side quests just weren't that interesting. But in Tomb Raider, the world definitely kind of does a good job of sucking you in, and it makes you feel, you know, very, very good about yourself when you uncover a hidden path that wasn't immediately obvious. In terms of the remaster quality itself, so it's been, how I would say, respectfully modernized. So the visual upgrade is fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot cleaner models, so that's both for you, enemies, you know, environment, all that sort of stuff. Their lighting improvements are insane as well. There's very, very smooth performance. And one thing I want to mention before I talk a little bit more about like the lighting improvements and those sorts of things is that they have done something absolutely fantastic, which is when you're playing through the game, at any point, literally any point, cutscenes, you know, menus, I believe, as well as just regular gameplay, you can go ahead and press F1 on your keyboard, and it will immediately, no loading screen, nothing, immediately switch you between the original version of the game versus the new version of the game. So you can get an immediate, in-the-moment comparison to how the games looked between their two different states. So the original 1996 release versus the, you know, now playing it in 2025 or the 2024 release. So absolutely sensational on that front. And then on that front, you get things like the lighting improvements, which are super noticeable. So in some of the areas, this will be a very minute spoiler, you do fight a T-Rex early on in the game. When you're in that T-Rex area, I would recommend just spamming the F1 key a few times, because you'll see how big of a difference it makes. In the original 1996 title, the sky was essentially just a black skybox, which led to speculation around like if you were in a cave or something like that. But now, in this remastered version, there's an actual sky to be seen and experienced, and even the underwater areas just look absolutely fantastic. And this does a very, very good job of keeping the spirit of the original intact while still also making it accessible for new players, because I won't lie, Tomb Raider 1 is one of those games that you're probably not going to get through if you're going back and trying to play it in 2025 and you don't have the nostalgia factor to motivate you. So if you didn't originally play it when it came out, right? So if you're like, you know, 25 years old or younger, you're probably not going to go back and play Tomb Raider 1. So this remaster does a fantastic job of making it so that you can actually go back and enjoy the older content. And then lastly, for the positives that we're going to talk about here is going to be the enemy variety. So the enemy variety definitely helped keep the game fresh. There's a large range of threats that you can encounter. So you're going to be looking at anything from like, you know, apes, so like gorillas and those sorts of things, to lions, which is kind of what you would expect in a game like this. But you're also going to be fighting stuff like, you know, flying demons, as well as, you know, T-Rexes, raptors, those sorts of things. There's a lot that you can experience, and some of them do definitely get a bit tough to take on, but overall their presence definitely adds tension as well as a bit of unpredictability to each area. So the tension is really good at making this have almost like pseudo-horror elements to it, because again, the clunkiness of the gameplay and the clunkiness of the combat combines together with some close range encounters with, like, say for example, lions or apes that are just hiding behind corners, doors open up and they pop out, those sorts of things, that it really gives that like kind of jar, like, oh my god, I'm in danger, I got to take care of this, which is very, very well done. I don't think that was their intention though, could be wrong on that, but it actually does a very, very good job of adding some stress to the game as well, some, you know, just something to keep you on your toes, which is fantastic. We're going to go ahead and transition now and talk a little bit more about some of the negatives with the game. One of the first potential negatives I want to talk about is actually the voice acting. For me, at least, the voice acting was almost laughably bad, which I think you definitely could argue is actually a positive. It adds a little bit of humor and a little bit of that whole not so serious factor into the game, but it just feels very outdated, awkward, some of the voice delivery. I'll go ahead and insert some of the cutscenes here for you now.
What's a man gotta do to get that kind of attention from you?
It's hard to say exactly, but you seem to be doing fine.
Well, great. Though truth is, it ain't me that wants you.
Oh?
No, Miss Jacqueline Natla does, from Natla Technologies. You know, creator of all things bright and beautiful.
Seal it, Larson.
Ma'am.
Feast your eyes on this, Lara. How does that make your wallet rumble?
I'm sorry. I only play for sport.
Then you'll like a big park. Peru. Vast mountain ranges to cover.
And again, like I mentioned, this could be seen definitely as part of the game's charm, if, you know, depending on your taste and how you view things. So the other potential negative, which wasn't really an issue for me, but it certainly could be for some players, is backtracking. So a lot of the puzzles as well as level designs are going to demand a lot of revisiting areas that you've already cleared earlier, areas that you might have missed something earlier. So if you don't like non-linear progression, this could definitely be frustrating, especially if you find yourself going through certain parkour aspects multiple times and then combine that with a death or something like that. It's definitely going to start to add up over time, and I could certainly see it to start to frustrate some players. So just keep that in mind if that's not something that you're really into, right? So there is going to be a lot of backtracking, ladies and gentlemen. Just be prepared. Now, with both the positives as well as the negatives out of the way, we are going to go ahead and take a look at the final thoughts on the game, which will include our SWAS meter, ladies and gentlemen. So, in conclusion, Tomb Raider Remastered is definitely a very loving, well thought out restoration that captures what really helped to make the original game so incredibly special. It demands a lot of patience, right? Obviously, but it does reward it with exploration as well as, level design that really just stands the test of time. I do definitely recommend it for any sort of retro game fan. So if you're a fan of that kind of older genre of game, something that we don't necessarily see these days, if you're a fan of exploration, it's going to be fantastic for you as well. Or if you're just simply looking to explore, or experience Lara Croft's roots, but with a bit more of a modern polish on it, right? A little bit of lipstick on the pig, so to speak. Because that's kind of where I'm at. I've played and enjoyed the modern games, but I really just wanted to see where it came from. So let's go ahead and talk about this well-received SWAS meter. So what is this? Well, you might think it stands for sweaty ass, which would actually not be the case, but it is definitely the inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, it stands for story, world, action, sound, and style. So the story, of course, being just how good is the story? Was it enthralling? Was I interested? Did I want to keep playing it? World is going to be the actual world building, as well as, some of the enemies that you'll find in it, as well as, prop placement and textures and all that sort of stuff that you would expect as a part of an RPG or a gaming world. The action is going to be exactly that. So it's going to be things like combat, movement during combat, as well as just, the parkour in this case and all those sorts of things. Sound, very simple, very straight to the point. It's going to be music, soundtracks, weapon firing sounds, all that sort of stuff, right? The sound design as a whole. And ladies and gentlemen, you've also been listening to the main OST in the background of this entire video. Very catchy stuff indeed. And finally, the style is going to be essentially the art style of the game, or in this case, the stylized remaster of it. So these are going to be my ratings. So for the story, I am actually going to go ahead and give it a 4 out of 10. I was very disappointed with the story. There wasn't a whole lot to it. Things weren't very well fleshed out. I went through the entire game and basically had no clue what I was doing, but that's okay. I enjoyed every minute of it. The world is definitely going to be an 8 out of 10. I think the world design is actually very good. The levels are very open. There's not a lot of clutter or anything like that, which is definitely indicative of its age, right? So the action, 100% going to be a 9 out of 10. It was very close to a 10 out of 10, except for that initial jank that took me a long time to get over. So if that wasn't there, or if I, got accustomed to it a little bit sooner, it probably would have been a 10 out of 10 on the action. Sound, 8 out of 10. Definitely enjoyed the soundtrack. There's really only one notable soundtrack, though, which is the main menu OST for Tomb Raider 1. The other Tomb Raiders have a bit more soundtracks going on there as well. And then finally, we're talking about style. I don't think it gets much better than this, ladies and gentlemen, but it is going to be an 8 out of 10. Still just an 8 out of 10 instead of a 9 or a 10 because it has aged a little bit, right? So there's definitely some, some seams showing around the edges, a little bit wear and tear here and there. But overall, that's going to bring us to a 7.4 out of 10 rating, which I think categorizes it as definitely worth your money, though personally I would probably end up waiting for a sale before purchasing this particular title. So that being said, thank you guys all so much for watching the review, and as always, I'll see you next time.